Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. What a weekend we had. So, I'm going to talk charts today. I'm going to talk Bitcoin. I'm going to give you an update on Bitcoin Cash. The battle continues. And we're going to talk Ethereum, Litecoin, and some of the other big names just to get a quick feel for the market. But mostly it's going to be Bitcoin and some of the strategies I'm looking at here. But if you missed it, there was an epic 5-hour live stream watching the Bitcoin Cash debacle this weekend. You know, famous last words. I will never start another live stream again with the words, I'm probably going to make this a 30-minute live stream and we'll just wrap it up. So for all of you that hung with me into the wee hours of the morning, wee hours of the night, whatever time it was, and there was a lot of you guys, thank you. Appreciate the support. It was actually a really fun time. I was exhausted. I gave away some courses. I gave away a little Bitcoin. When I started that live stream, we were at, I think, $6,300 Bitcoin, and we basically saw this crazy action happen real time, and the bounce, and Bitcoin Cash go to 2,500 and crash back down, and it was a very interesting time. So right now, these markets are in a little bit of a pause. It's kind of been nice to see the not so turbulent action today, but even then, it's been pretty volatile in some of the areas. But most of the altcoins haven't moved a whole lot. Everything's kind of just watching what Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash do here. And there's still a little bit of a backlog in the Bitcoin network. We're starting to see things come back on, but for a while there, it was slow. Some exchanges were temporarily down. Exodus wallets had to take Bitcoin off for a little bit because the fees were so high. It was just unprecedented in a lot of ways. Now, we've seen backlogs, but never to the magnitude that we're seeing right now. And so this story continues. So what happens next? So here's what I'm thinking on Bitcoin. We've had a very nice rally off of the low. We basically went down to around 5,500, slightly below that for a very brief moment, but pretty much held around that mid 5,000 range. And we have had a nice little rally, but look at where we're rallying, right up into that 10 EMA on the daily chart. I am still very cautious here from a Bitcoin rally perspective because I was expecting a bounce. I was expecting it to start a little higher, to be honest with you. I didn't think we'd drop that far that night, but we did. But then we ultimately did get that bounce I was looking for. And if you guys remember saying, I mentioned we were going to bounce probably into that 6,700, 6,800 mark. We could even go as high as that 6,900 area, but I think we would fail right around there. And that just happens to be a key support level that ultimately failed. We're bouncing right into that. It's totally normal to see a bounce, so it's okay to take a little BTC here. Just got to know that that's going to be the key level to watch. If it starts to break down going into that level, we could see another leg down. And ultimately, I'm thinking if we follow suit with the last big corrections we saw, they took us down anywhere from 35 to 40% basically. And so if we take from the very top of this most recent move, 35% is going to put it at 5,100 Bitcoin down to 40%. That takes you down to basically 47 and change. So between 4,800 and 51. And as I mentioned before, that $5,000 mark is a key psychological area, and it also correlates with this last big consolidation slash base. And so it's not unusual to see these big corrections basically come down right to that prior high and then begin to bounce from there if we're going to see another leg up. And I'm thinking we're going to still see another move to the downside, and that could just retest this 5,400 low. So that's an alternative. Look for that, and if it starts to bounce above that or slightly undercuts it and puts in a good double bottom, then that may be the low. But if we go down to 5,000, I'm thinking we're going to be pretty close to a low there. If you look at the RSI levels and some of these indicators, we're bouncing here, but it's pretty weak. It's not very strong. Volume was above average on this first bar, but this most recent day has been very low volume, very quiet action. So just keep an eye on this. Right now, my alternative strategy is looking at some of the altcoins that trade in USD pairs and making entries from that perspective, as opposed to going into Bitcoin and then trading some altcoins that way. Let's take a look at some of the altcoins. Okay, so first we got to talk Bitcoin Cash, because that is the big market mover right now, and that has been sucking up all of the volume and the action over the last couple of days. So there's a lot of eyes here. We saw that big reversal, and if you guys remember, I mentioned we were going to most likely see more downside. We did, and we went down as low as $1,000 on this most recent move. Here's the daily chart, and you can see the RSI was just crazy extreme highs. It was at almost 93 on the daily. Has since come down to about 77, and so it's worked off a lot of that overbought condition and could potentially be setting it up for another rally. That was a big reversal, high volume reversal here, but the decline hasn't actually been too bad on the volume side. So if you look at the 4-hour here, you can see we're still trending lower, and it doesn't look like it here, but this is very volatile and makes it very hard to do any kind of trading or holding if you're using stops, because I mean, we were as low as $1,000 just earlier in my day here, and we were as high as $1,500. That's a 47% move in a day, and so it's very volatile. Depending on where you caught it, you either were doing very well or you could have been down 15-20% very quickly. And so that's the thing right now, is it's just so extreme, so volatile with Bitcoin Cash. It's making it very hard to do anything with it other than some maybe quick trades right now, just high risk. But it is starting to consolidate here, trying to find a low, and the most recent little base consolidation was right around that $900,000 range. And so that's where it found that low here multiple times. If we put in a little bit of a higher low here and begin to move higher, a break above that $1,500 range could signal the next move up in Bitcoin Cash. Now, looking at the daily chart, that little consolidation area, that $1,000 mark, just happens to correlate with this 10 EMA that's starting to march higher here. So that could be the low. So I'd be watching that potential little bull flag pattern putting in right here. But again, this is very wide. It may look tight here on this chart just because it's come up from these very low levels, but these are some pretty wide percentage moves. So hard to play those. Be careful on those here. So taking a look at Ethereum, I've been talking about this very tight consolidation pattern that it's starting to put in. And here in the last couple of days, there's been a little bit of a battle going on in this tight range here between 290 up to around 320. And this is going to get very interesting over the next couple of days. It's really trying to edge out here. And I'm thinking we go higher, but just keep an eye on this trend line, because this really is a symmetrical pattern that could go either way. And so I'm looking for a big volume break one way or the other, but this is one that I'd be watching here very closely. Could be a good alternative to Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash if the volatility continues. I'm thinking we might see some funds moving into Ethereum because it's been so stable here, but that could begin to change. Now, the nice thing about Ethereum is it also trades in USD in most markets, and so you don't have to enter through Bitcoin like many of the other altcoins. And so the thing with the altcoins is if you want to take a position in them, you also have to consider what Bitcoin is doing, because even though the BTC chart may be holding up just nice or even slightly breaking out, if that breakout move doesn't offset the percentage move down in Bitcoin, then it's still a net loss if you're looking at a fiat position. So just to keep that in mind, that's why if you're holding some cash and if you want to look at making a trade and you're thinking Bitcoin might be too risky or too volatile, then this is another alternative. And I always look at both. I look at the BTC chart as well as the USD, because sometimes there's a good breakout on the USD chart, just like we saw in Dash here recently. So Ethereum is definitely on my watch list right now, high alert, and I certainly hold some still on my long-term portfolio, but could be looking to take a little bit more of a position here if it starts to break out. Another one is Litecoin. So Litecoin has been following this rising support line here for quite some time, and it's putting in a little bit of a cup and handle type of formation here, with the first high being around 69 and the most recent around 67 USD. And this little downtrend handle is looking pretty good. Volume starting to come down here a little bit, so I'd be watching for a reversal move higher on this. And the thing to watch is you zoom in here, you can see this little pattern just really starting to tighten up on this 4-hour chart. And so I'm watching these these downtrend lines on a lot of these as they're starting to take place here. They're correcting a little bit. And if you look at the BTC chart on some of these, you can see that it's also consolidating, pulling back right to a key average, moving average here. So for example, Litecoin BTC here on Poloniex, you can see we had that nice run up. It's been outperforming Bitcoin for the last week or so. Now pulling in a little bit, and this is ideally where you would want to see it hold and then start to move higher. And so this higher move would potentially correlate with that USD chart breakout if Bitcoin can maintain these levels. Now this could start to move higher versus Bitcoin and just sit tight on USD if Bitcoin starts to break down again. So kind of makes it tricky. You got to consider both angles there. But this setup is actually really interesting to see this pulling in here and the correlating USD chart. So I'm watching both, but I'm looking for a breakout above that $62, $64 range as an early indicator. Dash. So I've been talking about Dash breaking that downtrend line and was starting to march higher, and then out of nowhere it just pumped and it just went from mid 300s up to almost 500 before pulling in here, and it's pulling back, but just a powerful move up, breaking out to new highs on Dash. You can see the old high was right here just above 400, and we pretty much just cleared all of that in no time. Very strong move a couple days ago, pulling in now. If you zoom in a little bit, you can see it's starting to consolidate here, so we'll be interested in see if it holds. Now, it's not unusual to see them pull back to that old high, which is, you remember, back here around 400, 410 or so. And right now, that's exactly where Dash is at. Now, this pullback, the volume is really starting to get quiet here. And so if this is a normal pullback, ideally, this is where you're going to want to see it hold right around these levels and potentially break this little flag pattern here and move to the upside. So beyond some of those, most other altcoins are just kind of consolidating, riding back and forth in this little bit of a range. Here's NEO, for example. You can see it's tightening up versus Bitcoin. Omise Go doing something similar, still in a little bit of a range. Try to break out yesterday, pulling in a little bit, but everything is pretty much range bound. You can see Stratus sitting very tight here. And so a lot of these are doing similar patterns. Lisk try to break out here and pulled right back to that breakout point right now, but everything is just kind of sitting tight as Bitcoin moves. I've noticed some of these will pull back a little bit. And so right now, the two ones to watch are Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Those are the ones that are just influencing a lot of the market right now. But definitely keep an eye on some of those other ones I mentioned, Litecoin, Ethereum, probably being some of the big ones. But I'm also watching NEO here for a potential breakout. I'm looking at Omise Go. If some of these can start to gain some traction here on the consolidation on the daily chart, just kind of normal pause after a pretty decent move off the lows. And so a lot of these are setting up these patterns, and I'm just kind of watching them stair step up potentially to the next resistance level. So that's going to be it for tonight, guys. A lot more action to come, I'm sure. I'm really hoping that I don't have to do another 5-hour live stream, but if I do, I hope you're there with me that time too. Till next time, take care, guys.